high school, I remember Scott always driving me in his Audi, speeding around Manhattan Beach. And once I turned 16, I told my dad I wanted an Audi like Scott's, even though that didn't happen. I will always remember his smile, goofiness, generous heart, comic remarks, and the laughter moments we spent together. He was always a ball of energy, which is why my grandma would always call him XCK, because he was always excited and nonstop. He is now finally in peace, watching over our family and his beautiful son Christian, but his presence still lingers in our spirits and in our hearts. We love you, Scotty. Rest in peace.
As long as I can remember, Uncle Scott was upbeat and fun. Whenever I saw him walking to the door, I would get a big smile on my face. When I was smaller, he threw me up in the air. As I grew taller and older, he would still throw me in the air. His personality was like a kid. He made me feel good. He made me feel happy. Uncle Scotty was special to me. I loved him and I'll miss him.
Uncle Scott, you were a great father, son, uncle, and friend. You had an unforgettable smile, one that I'm sure everyone will remember you by. You were brave and always so fun to be around. I have grown up hearing so many Uncle Scotty stories, but I will forever remember the love you had for your family and others. Thank you for the love you showed us and the great times you had lucky enough to share. We will remember you always.
Now we're going to have Mr. Gregory Alpha come up and say a few words.
So I'm Gregory, for those of you who don't know me, Scott's cousin. That term definitely doesn't adequately describe how special he was. Definitely more like a best friend than a brother. And, I know we all have hundreds, if not thousands, of Scott memories and Scott stories, but I'll just briefly share with you my very first memory of Scott, which was in St. Croix, which is where I grew up. We used to have a house which had a pool, and on the second story of the house there was a balcony that ran along the length of the pool. And as a kid, I was always peering over the edge, wondering what it would be like to take that leap. And I never had the courage or the parental consent to do it, but maybe when I was 6 or 7, Scott and the whole family came to visit, and I swear not even 5 minutes had passed before we picked him up from the airport, and I looked over and there was Scott on the railing, peeling off his shirt. And of course, all the adults were up in arms. Scott, no, get down. And boom, he went straight in. Beautiful dive head first. And you know, that's how we're always going to remember him. This fearless, amazing, brilliant, intense light that I'll always carry with me. I love him, and can't wait to see him.
Hi, my name is John Guderian, and a lot of you may know me as Guido, or Guides. Scott also called me Guido-man, and he had a certain way of saying it. Guido-man! So before I start, I'd like to extend my deepest heartfelt condolences to the Powell family, Jesse and Monique, and Mike and Beverly, and Holman, and Mike's kids, and of course to Scott's son, Christian, and Christian's mother, Monty. So what I would like to do today is share some of my memories of Scott, and believe me, there are millions and millions of stories. I'm going to keep it to the rated G version today. I'd like to share a few of our personal conversations and just give you an idea of the Scott Alan Powell that I knew and loved as a brother. As with any relationship, our friendship had its ups and downs, but no matter what, in the end we would always say bros for life and give each other a big bear hug. I also have to admit that over the recent years, I have been remiss in most of my old relationships and friendships. I haven't been available, I've been slow to return phone calls, and I haven't attended any gatherings. Even though I was absent and out of touch, Scott always made sure to inform me and keep me in the loop. Scott was always a catalyst at keeping people connected and bringing people together. Today, as I reflect back on my absence, it weighs heavy on my soul as I wish I had been there for Scott. I wish that I had one more chance to talk to him, to tell him what an important part of my life he's been, and to let him know how many lives he has touched, and how special he is to so many people. I wish I had one more chance to call him brother and tell him that I love him. I'm sorry. I first met Scott 35 years ago, shortly after the Powells moved to the South Bay. And back then, life was much simpler. Our biggest cares were surfing, skateboarding, and bike rides, and of course, school. I was in 8th grade at Hermosa Beach Middle School, and Scott was in 7th grade at Our Lady of Guadalupe, also in Hermosa. We met while skateboarding down at the Hermosa Pier, and I will never forget seeing this kid ride up to us with the biggest ear-to-ear grin you've ever seen. His nickname back then was Smiley, which was very fitting as Scott always had an infectious smile to light up any room. Over the next year or so, our paths would cross only occasionally, and always while out skateboarding. It wouldn't be until my sophomore year at Costa that Scott and I really bonded, and he became one of my closest and best friends. I say one of my best friends because we had a very large group of friends with a solid core of Johns and Scotts. I mentioned earlier that I was one of the Johns. There were at least 7 Johns and 3 Scotts, among many others. 2 of the Scotts were incidentally Scott Alans. We had Scott Alan Powell and Scott Alan Ziegler, who we also lost in 2003. I'll never forget the first time Scott invited us to come over to his house. It was Scott Ziegler, John Cotter, and I. At the time, the Powells were living in North Redondo, and we rode our bikes over to Scott's, walked up to the front door. Scott turned and looked at us and said, "You can't come in." I'm not allowed to have anyone in the house. I remember we looked at each other in bewilderment. We did this routine on several occasions until finally we were allowed in the entryway, but no further. We were instructed not to touch anything. Within the next couple of years, the Powells moved into their house on Matthews in Manhattan Beach. And at this point, our friendship had grown so close that I was at Scott's nearly every day. We would hang out for hours and just talk about every topic under the sun. I can remember having in-depth conversations with Jesse and Michael's friend Milan. The first time I was invited to dinner, Scott's mom made coquille Saint-Jacques, one of her specialties. It was absolutely delicious, and I told Scott to call me whenever she made it, which he did, and I had on several occasions. Scott's room downstairs had a door that opened to the backyard, and whenever Scott and I were hanging out in his room and he did something to get in trouble, which was pretty easy for Scott, his mom would call, "Alan!" I knew when I heard Alan, it was time to go. I would slip out the back way. And one of the most memorable Alan moments was when Scott had a party after senior prom. The next morning, we made sure the house was spotless, and I mean spotless. Later that day, when Scott's parents returned home, Monique found a bottle cap in one of the plants. I heard, "Alan, you had a party!" Our jaws dropped, and in my typical fashion, I slipped out the back door. And it was about that same time back then that Scott had his first job at Kenny Shoes out on Artesia. And he always had to work on Friday nights. And someone in our group would always say, "Let's go bug Scott." So we'd go in there and try on shoes. And there was actually one time we went in to bother him, and he ended up selling me a pair of wingtips. He was such a good salesman. Later, Scott, John Boehm, and John Cotter all worked at the Warehouse, Records and Tapes. We used to listen to music on records to you younger guys. That's when Scott really started getting into music, and as a lot of you know, Scott was really into music